at Jonathan as you see fit. So I just want to introduce and say once again, we are just very excited to have landed 3 fantastic candidates. It was really exciting interviewing the 3 of you and selecting you to join us next week. And Jonathan is one of those. The board will not join you as I put out. And, I also want to thank HYA for Max and Dallas and Nola who couldn't attend tonight for all the work you guys have done to make all of this happen for us and to bring our candidates in and organize this forum. So that's what I've got. And then I'm just going to leave the room and let you guys have as much time as possible together. So Jonathan, we'll see you next week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Christoph.
Great. Thank you, Christoph. Really appreciate your leadership on the board. Good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for joining us after what I'm sure has been a long day for you, and having 4 grandchildren ages 7 to 17 in public school. I really appreciate all you do during these remote, hybrid, and face-to-face times. For support staff, teachers, administrators. So thank you for joining us today. I'm president of Hazard Young and Teen Associates. I started my career in 1969 working with 12 young men from Harlem, New York in a residential program. And been everything from a substitute teacher to state superintendent of schools, and honored to be working with the Poudre School District, and excited about helping facilitate the process to identify the next superintendent, such a critically important endeavor, which is why we're especially glad you are here today. Dallas, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Dallas Strawn, and I'm a consultant, and I work for HYA, and we've been working very hard trying to get as much feedback as we can about your district, about needs, about what you would like to see in the next superintendent. I think we had almost 30 applicants, and the board worked really hard. And the final 3 that you're going to be seeing in the next, well, today and tomorrow and next week, possibly when they come into town, they're just, we feel outstanding candidates. And it's a pleasure for us to work with you. I'm a long-time Colorado person. I live in Douglas County, and I've been in education 51 years, and I love it, and I'm still kicking. So it's a pleasure to be here with all of you. Thank you.
And there you are, Dallas. Good. Thanks, Dallas. So here are, so we have our 3 candidates. We had Ms. Sanchez earlier, but now we have Jonathan Cooper. And at the end of the meeting, there's just one question about feedback, just for any comments. Do you have any questions, or if the interview questions you want to suggest for the board members when they do their next round of interview. And we'll put this link up on the screen. It's also available on the superintendent search webpage. But let's talk now about how we're going to participate. So we found it best just to use the Q&A, and you can type in a question. This can be done anonymously, or you can put your name in, and we just ask that you be considerate. As teachers, you know the importance of that, so I'm not going to wax poetic about that as I do more in the open community forums. So we'll use that. The chat, you can, if you need to send a message to me or to Dallas, you can do that, but the chat's generally disabled, and we just focus on the Q&A part for the question. So use that, and you can start the questions coming in at any time. We have Jonathan is currently superintendent of Mason City Schools, Ohio. We have his Twitter feed up there, and it's I've really enjoyed, Jonathan, getting to know you more actually face to face and through talking, but I've also really enjoyed your Twitter feed as well. And we're going to turn this over to Jonathan, and we asked him to start, as we asked all the candidates to start with this prompt. We know we have several of you on the phone today, so we will take time to read the questions, and I'll try to post some of the longer ones in SlideShare as well. But here's what we asked. We'll ask Jonathan. Please take a few moments to share your story. Tell us why you want this position, what excites you about this opportunity, and what makes you the right fit.
Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Dallas, and thank you so much, Max and Christoph, for bringing me here today. I want to congratulate the community just on going through a very transparent process and bringing candidates to the table and making this a very attractive community and district to serve in. So congratulations to all of you. You deserve to have great candidates, but you also deserve to have a great superintendent. And I hope that is what you find through the process. So I'd love to share a little bit of my story. So, Jonathan Cooper, superintendent, Mason City Schools. We're a wonderful, I serve in a wonderful community here in Mason, Ohio, and I am blessed to have a great team of people, great kids that we serve here, programming that's just nationally ranked, and a district that serves, we have over 75 languages spoken in our district. We have wonderful programming for students of all different ability levels, and that's been a blessing. So here's my story, just going back a few moments in time. So I started as a teacher, and the reason I started as a teacher is because teaching is just part of the family business. I actually tried to run away from teaching and get away from it, but my parents are retired teachers. They served in the school districts close to where I grew up, in a small town in Indiana. And I watched them my whole life dedicate their lives to something that was purposeful. They knew their why, and that really inspired me as a young person. And so even though I tried to get away from it, it drew me back. And my basketball coach from high school, his wife was a principal, and she asked me to come along and serve in a role that was serving students who struggled in school. It was Title I position at the time. And I came in and I started to fall in love with the concept of being able to use my talents, my energy to serve students who had different levels of needs. And so that took me on to my teaching career, and that took me on to then get interested in leadership. And I started to realize that I could bring people together. And as a teacher, I would bring people together for projects, and we would write grants together. And it was something I really loved. And so I was encouraged along the way to look into leadership. And I became a principal, a building principal. And I learned so much through that process of being a building principal. And I began to appreciate just all the different aspects of a school building, culture, climate, and how to bring people together at a whole nother level. And then I moved on to be a district level chief innovation officer, and then to superintendent. And, people ask me, well, why? Why now? Why would you want to come to the Poudre School District when you're in such a great place? And it's a great question. It's the only school district in the nation that I'm looking at. And here's the why. I always tell people, and I talk to my daughter, I have 4 kids, and I talk to my daughter who's a 3rd grader, and I say to her all the time, dream big. And dreaming big for her means different things than it means for me. And I can't just say that to my own kids and not live that out and take steps towards that. I also, when I'm mentoring young leaders and working with leaders, and I'm telling them, find your true north and walk towards that, which means aligning your personal values, the values of our family, being out there in a beautiful community like Fort Collins and the surrounding areas. And we were out there last summer, and we visited out west quite a bit with our family. And we were sitting out there actually throwing a Frisbee out on the big green space at the university there at Colorado State University. And we're throwing a Frisbee, and we're just enjoying the beautiful weather. This is last summer, and realizing that this is such a beautiful community, but there's just something about it. My wife says to me, there's not any place I could imagine pulling us away from Mason, but there is something here that is beautiful that may have some alignment with our values. And so looking at aligning our personal values and then aligning my professional values together, and that piece, when those overlap and you find your true north in that, you can take your talents and you can serve and help others to take their district to the next level. And I think that's something that I've definitely been looking forward to as a part of this process, and very interested in learning more about the school district. And what excites me about the Poudre School District is the potential. When I read and study about what the schools have been doing, and when I read all the information that you've given to HYA in the process and saying, this is what we want. For example, when I read things like, I want a thoughtful listener, I want a firecracker, someone that brings energy to the district. I want community partnership. I want someone with integrity, honesty, someone that's humble, an innovator, an education leader, and someone that has experience with equity and what that really looks like, not just as a conversation, but as actual work moving forward. It's something that describes, if I was sitting in the next room over writing down my story, those are the key points that would come across in my story. And so I feel like at this moment in time, after serving as superintendent in a wonderful school district, I feel like it's at that time to take that next step, because I really see this as the next step in aligning my personal values with my professional values as well. So hopefully that gives you a little introduction. There's so much more, but I also want to be respectful of our time and get to the questions. And I want to thank all of you again for joining us this afternoon.
Great, Jonathan. Thank you so much. And we will give you some time at the end too. So
Thank you.
we really appreciate that. And actually, the first two questions I already have posted. So Dallas, I'll do these first two, and then you can do the third after that. Would be great.
Perfect.
And then
Perfect.
we'll go from there. So this is an important question, and it's there we go. Oops, go back to that one. Jonathan, how are you going to create a we community at all levels, in all groups, rather than an us and them mindset between the groups within the Poudre School District?
Well, I love this question, because I think when you talk about we and bringing people together, I'll first share the importance of that and then share an example of how I've been able to lead that in my current role as superintendent. First, it's important because if we as a school district and as a community are pulling in the same direction, the potential is remarkable what a school district can do for kids. I think about so many school districts that don't have that aligned, shared vision, pulling in the same direction, and how they begin to splinter off, and it feels like we're chasing after initiatives. And I think it's so important that we build that community component. And it's something that when I came into Mason City Schools, there was a similar desire. I listened closely to our teachers, and our teachers told me we need to focus on culture. And then I listened to our bus drivers, and they said, we don't feel like we've had this leadership that just allows us to feel a part of things. It's always like the teachers, and then the bus drivers, and then the food service, and all the different camps were isolated in these silos. And so one of the first things that I was able to recognize was that need. And that was because I listened to our staff. And even as simple as when I was doing communication to the staff, it was the staff. It wasn't the teachers or this group, but it was being inclusive with my language. And so taking that feedback and being empathetic to that and how people felt. And so what we did was we came together as a leadership team, and we began to talk about what is our culture going to be? Culture meaning, how are we going to live out life together in a community? And so we put together a culture guide. So I'll just share with you, because every moment I can share this with anybody, I do. And I would do the same thing in the Poudre School District. Is we focused on culture. And we didn't just talk about it as a cool, shiny little poster. No, we talked about the language of that, the alignment. We talked about everything in this to talk about, okay, these are our 3 rocks, our focus areas. This came from feedback. I went out to the community and I started to listen, and I did community conversations and had, I think, over 100 community conversations in my first year. And I listened for themes. I brought those themes back to our leaders and our teacher leaders and our leaders in different district groups that we have. So we have our bus drivers as a whole different union, and so we brought them together. And one of the things that we were able to do is we built what I call a team of team structure. And that team of team structures allowed every single person in the organization to be a part of a team of 8. And it allowed us to begin to share information more efficiently across the organization. It's something that General McChrystal has written about quite a bit, about the power of teams, so that you can begin to not just have a top-down organization, but you begin to flatten the organization so that people feel like their voices are heard. They feel like their story actually matters. And so you can see that came out very clearly. Your story matters as part of our work. So how I would do that is very similar. I would listen, I would build teams, I would bring people together, and then I would act on those. And so people could see that my voice does matter here. Jonathan does listen, and I see actual, not just him saying that, but I see action behind that and taking care of us. So that's how I would approach that.
Great. Thank you so much, John. And then I'm going to come over to the next one on the screen share here. And it's an important question for these times, that's for sure. How would you prioritize the funding of mental health services through the district? Will you prioritize additional funding and support for integrated service teachers? That's the paras, the support so that they can have planning time, IEP meetings, it's comp, et cetera.
Yes, I just want to make sure I understand this is two parts, the mental health services of the district, and then also the prioritization of additional funding to support the integrated services. So here's how I would approach this piece specifically, and I hope I understand the question. First and foremost, the mental health is near and dear to me personally, and I'll share why. I have 4 kids that are going through our school system now, and from freshman down to 3rd grade. And we talk to our own kids about their mental health and mental wellness. And so when I was coming in as superintendent, about a year before that, I was chief innovation officer. I've been serving this district for 7 years and chief innovation officer, but started to move into the deputy superintendent role. And I have a great relationship with our students, and they know they can come to me very accessible. I try to make myself accessible. And so they called on me to come to meet with a large group of students. And so there are about 100 students in a room. And I came to listen to them. And one of the things that they shared with me very clearly was, Jonathan, we cannot have another suicide in our school district. We had about over 10 years of time, I think it was 7 suicides through that 10 year period. And I don't know if I have that number exactly right. It may have been actually a little bit more than that. But one of the things that what I heard the students saying was, we as students know this is a problem. We need you as adults to step up and lead this effort and get us the resources that we need. And I mean, talk about a moment where you choke up as a leader and you have an emotional a moment with your students. It was a moment of awakening for me, realizing that we had dropped the ball. We had failed our own kids. And so we stepped forward right away. We went on a search. We found a peer-to-peer suicide prevention program. You probably maybe even heard of it, came out of Utah with Hope Squad. We flew in Dr. Hudnall to come talk with us about that. We looked at several different groups. We went out and visited. We brought that to our students as the first step to say a peer-to-peer support system, because our students were already talking about suicidal ideation. We're in a very high-performing school district. And so it is constantly this race to the top. And so we wanted to address that with our students. So we put in systems in place. Then we took funding, not only for that, but then we took funding and I started to allocate funding for a mental wellness coordinator. Brought the mental wellness coordinator into our district and she did a phenomenal job, but she needed more resources. So then we brought in funding to have a mental wellness coordinator in each of our buildings so that we would have a mental wellness hub in each of our buildings to serve not just our students, but to serve our staff. Because we heard from our students and we knew that was a concern. But then, you start listening more and you start hearing from your staff, and our staff was not isolated from this. They were being impacted by concerns around mental illness and mental health. And so then I started to partner with, we have wonderful resources around this area. And so I worked with the Linder Center of Hope, and we brought in a program where we could actually work with our staff called Start the Conversation. And Start the Conversation was led by me. The whole program is designed where the CEO talks to the staff about how to start conversations around mental health and mental illness, whether it's someone you're serving in your family or it's you struggling through some of those realities and trying to take the stigma out of the conversation. So we invested the funds, the time and the resources to make sure that we were actually addressing that. And so over time, over these 3 years, we have a very robust program and partnership with Cincinnati Children's Hospital, with the Linder Center of Hope, and with other resources that connect with our families and our staff to make sure that they have all the support they need for mental wellness. So I could go on for probably an hour to 2 hours just talking on this topic. We have been very fortunate not to have another suicide since we put these in place. And we know that nothing's perfect in this. But we have also noticed that, and I'll give one more example, then I'll move on to the second part of this question in funding and how we support our support staff. But one of the things that I shared, our school district has been open 5 days a week for the entire year. And we have an online program we developed for anyone that would choose and want to have online as well. So we have that option. But one of the things we noticed right away is that halfway through the year, we had a 3-week period of time where we had about, and this is a full semester. We had one student that went to the hospital for dehydration as they got sick and had some COVID related pieces. But we had about 15 students in a 3-week period of time that were in the hospital for suicide ideation. And this is with all the programming. So it's never work that is finished. It's work that's always ongoing, and it's work that's so important, and I would prioritize that. But I work with our principals, with our leaders, with our teachers to figure out how best to implement that, and with our students as well. The second part you asked about, I believe, was around how to prioritize funding for making sure that staff have time to plan, to collaborate, support staff, I believe it was. And yes, being a former teacher and having a student, having a child of my own, my third son, Miles, has Down syndrome. And so, and many other things that come along with that. And so the planning time around students, whether it's a student with special needs or my other son who is also identified gifted, planning time for that, those pieces must be prioritized because they're around our students and their needs. And so how we do that is very systematic. It's very planned. We have, at least where we are now, we have an entire schedule for what that looks like so that we can be thoughtful in that. And so that we have, not only do we have the time to work, but we also have goals that we're trying to meet. So we can measure the impact of that time that we're prioritizing. And I'm not sure if I'm getting to the heart of that question. So I hope I am. But if not, please ask and help me to clarify exactly what you were hoping for in that question.
Thanks, Jonathan. It sounds to me like you answered it thoroughly, but if not, we'll ask the individual who asked it to respond again. But Dallas, could you read the next couple questions?
Sure, I'll be happy to. John, what do you think it means to effectively collaborate with licensed educators and classified staff?
Well, what it means to me is that we're a people business. And so as a people business, we work closely together. And I don't see those as less importance. I think when you look at a public school and a school system, every person plays a significant part. So when I go out and I do a tour through our district, for example, I'm out giving the same message and same concentration to my classified staff as I would my teachers. And I'll give a really practical example of something that I just had a conversation about this today. At one point, I got a handful of anonymous letters from some of our classified staff, and I don't know who, and it's okay that I don't, because I just needed to hear the message. But it was, can you look at our pay scale compared to, because one of the things we've always talked about is we try to have our teachers in the very top tier of compensation, so they're always at the top of the market, so that we're the most attractive place around, and we retain our staff and appreciate them. Well, there's a group of our classified staff not feeling that and not seeing that data was not aligned. And so I was saying a message that was not aligned with reality. And so I did get those letters, and I've had people say, well, don't pay attention to anonymous letters. But the reality is these are voices, and they're real, and they're people telling me something. And so I took those and I said to our chief talent officer, I said, let's do a study on this. Let's do a comparison, and let's find out if there's real truth and data behind this, then let's make the change. We must prioritize all of our staff. It's not a difference. And so giving voices and space for people to be at the table, no matter what your role is in the district, is critical for a healthy district. Going back to this culture guide, I can't say that your story matters in this, and this is what we put together in Mason, but I'm sure there would be something similar in Poudre School District. Your story matters if we're listening to it. It doesn't mean that we're going to get it perfect every time, but it means that we must listen, and we must work together so that everyone's story is a part of our future.
Thank you.
Good. Thanks. I'll take the first one from John Dallas, and you can take the next one. How's that?
Perfect. Thank you.
Good. Oh, thanks, John. And I did have the opportunity to interview John personally earlier during the engagement phase. So I appreciate you're being on today, John. What is Jonathan, what is the role of the teacher voice in district decision making?
Well, I couldn't imagine making decisions without the teacher voice. And I'll tell you that it's something that is is a constant. Asking for feedback. We recently did a survey in our district, and I think we have a pretty robust feedback system. Like I talked about the team of team structure. The whole point of that idea is that the district is broken out into just a system of teams, and those teams continue to have feedback loops that are coming through. And so it basically flips the model. So it's no longer superintendent and then everybody in the decision-making process. It's everyone's voice, pull out themes, hear those clearly, and then make decisions moving forward. And so the teacher voice is critical. And I'm a teacher at heart. I mean, that is near and dear to everything I do, with my brother being a teacher, with my parents being teachers, my uncle being a teacher. So I value that voice at the table. One specific example I can give to you is so I told you we were open 5 days a week this year, and I worked with our teachers all through the summer to design a return to school plan that they felt confident with. There is no way that the largest buildings in the state of Ohio would have opened this year without me having teacher voice at the table. And actually, it's not just teacher voice. I had all the voices at the table. So I had all of our classified staff as well, because I didn't want to do something that was going to make people feel like they weren't heard or feel in jeopardy. And you can't pull off something like that without having everyone's voice. I've described my leadership style as a community sourced leadership style. You've heard of that whole idea of sourcing ideas together, but that community source is making sure that voices are there. And so the example I give you is, we hit a point in time, and we were watching our data closely, where we had over 400 quarantines in our high school at one point in time. There were 400 kids at home. We were looking at the data, and we realized none of the kids that were at home had symptoms. Maybe they were asymptomatic, but we didn't have any way of knowing. And so the teachers, however, here's what the teachers were going through. They were teaching in person, and then they had online things going on, and it was it was 14 days, and randomly kids were leaving their class and going off. And they're talking about mental health. It was really stressing their mental health. And so they called me over and said, Jonathan, we have to do something about this. So I sat down with the principal. I sat down with a large room of teachers and said, let's do it. Let's design something that's better, that's more sustainable. And so we did. And so we built a different approach during that time. And while we did that, and the approach was basically, they needed Wednesdays, for example, just to focus in on kids that were in quarantine. And so we did that. So we had our other kids go remote on those days and do asynchronous learning while they connected with our kids in quarantine. And while they were doing that, I then started working with the governor at the same time. I said, we have a problem. We have all this data showing that quarantines are just stressing our teachers and adding a whole nother level to them. And over time, I showed that data to our governor, and then we eventually started to change our approach to quarantine in the state of Ohio, because we went and we did a scientific study in our districts. And so I said, we have all this anecdotal data, we need scientific data before we can make a decision. And so that happened, but that all came from teacher voice. I'll tell you, this right here, this didn't come out of Jonathan's mind. This came out of teacher voice. They pulled me aside and said, I need you to focus on culture, Jonathan. So I brought our team together, and that's what we did.
Great.
Good. Hey, Jonathan, we appreciate your examples. Go ahead, Dallas.
Okay, Jonathan, what are your thoughts on collective bargaining for employees?
Hey, I just got a tentative agreement with our folks. And
Yay!
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I've been the superintendent for 3 years, and I've negotiated 3 times because of some budget situations. And so this last time we were so excited because I was able to, it was great because we just passed a levy to get a sustainable financial outlook for our future. And we passed the levy for the first time in 15 years. Wow. And passed with 70%, heading into the levy, right into the pandemic. We've never passed this. It was a record passing, but it was because we built that trust in our community. And then we were able to sit down with the teachers just a couple of weeks ago, right before they went on spring break, and really work that out. And I really started with, there's a feel of, it's almost like a blended approach. There's a feel of this interest-based bargaining, but it's not a true pure bargaining piece. But then we sit down and we start to really talk through what are the needs. And one example I'll give you is, I had teachers say to me in this last bargaining piece that we were going through, said, Jonathan, in case you're not here, we need something in the collective bargaining agreement that addresses online and all this new learning. And, I said, yeah, I don't really want to put something in there that's just reactive to the pandemic. However, I hear what you're saying. Tell me more. And so they told me more. They shared more. And so through that, we were able to co-construct language that actually supported the needs that they had, because they were representing all of our teachers there. And they wanted to make sure that we didn't get into a situation that people were feeling stuck online, for example, or they were feeling like they were having to work 24 hours a day. And so that came through just good collaboration, good listening with both parties. And I've been able to do that all the way through. And I would encourage you, and if you ever have a connection with any of our teachers or our union, reach out and ask them. And I hope they would share the same.
Great. Thank you so much, Jonathan. The next two questions are longish. So I'll take those to Dallas, and then you can take the third one. So this, Jonathan, you've talked about this one a bit earlier, and feel free to add a little bit if you like. But it's about the importance of all employee groups. So here's the question. How can you ensure that all three employee groups, administrative, teachers, and classified, have an equal voice and feel valued in their role in providing a quality education for our students?
Well, sure. I mean, I think as I shared earlier, that first of all, you have to believe that they all have an equal voice, and I do believe that's important. That's why we focused in our district on bringing all voices to the table and hearing everyone. I think the other piece of that is if there's specific needs, and probably when you're looking at those three groups specifically, it's really having an understanding of what the needs are, and understanding that sometimes one size fits all, one size fits none. And so we, instead of just assuming that this might work for one group or another, it's listening closely and having each party at the table, and having all the parties at the table share what their needs are, and then coming to logical conclusions that honor the work that each of those parties are conducting on a daily basis and what their needs are. So that's how I would see that happening. I can't imagine it any other way. And making sure that all groups are honored and there's equity across the board. And yeah, so that's how I would make sure a lot of listening, a lot of understanding, and making sure that voices are heard.
Great. Thanks, Jonathan. And here's the next one. Let me, excuse me. Have you worked in a site-based district such as Poudre School District previously? What do you see as the strengths and the challenges in such a system?
Okay. So there are strengths and challenges to any system. And yes, so I was in Kettering City Schools before this. I was a building principal, and we often refer to it as tight, loose leadership, where we had control over different parts of our budget. And so that was the experience that I do have. Yes. And so the power behind that, it allowed us to understand our neighborhood specifically. Like in that neighborhood I served, in the first school, around 98% free and reduced lunch, almost 100% free and reduced lunch. We had specific needs that we had to address in that neighborhood that were very different than literally over the tracks in the other neighborhood, where it was the wealthiest school, and which was the school that I ended up at after that, when we closed one school and brought all the kids together and consolidated. And it's another story, another time. But each community, or each group in a community or micro community, has certain needs. So that's the power of having the site-based. And you also have different cultures at each building. And so you want to be able to have the flexibility in that. I call it an agile system. Now, the other side of that is, or some of the concerns, is that you start to lose some alignment if you're not clear on what things are important for the entire school district. So for example, if the school district has made mental health a key priority, or as I think they call it in Poudre School District, an end or a goal, whatever that language that you use. Well, I always think of it like this. Goals are something that we can all agree upon, and we're all working toward the same goal. Now, the strategy in which we get to that goal, or the methodology in which we go to that goal, can look very different. When you're not clear about the goal and you don't have a shared vision of where we're heading, that's when you could have some challenges with site-based, because you have people pulling in all kinds of directions. and you start to lose some of the prioritization of the work that you're trying to work on. So that's the pros and cons. I do see pros and cons in that, and especially in a school district the size of Poudre, you definitely have to play to the strengths of that, but also be super clear about what are the things that are going to be district level or district wide, I should say, priorities.
Okay, thank you. This question, Jonathan, is how do you feel the programs and successes of your current district scale to a district the size of Poudre?
Oh, great question. One last piece on that last one is another danger, if it's not addressed carefully, is that you begin to build a larger equity gap. And that kind of connects to both of the question of how do you make sure that people are on the same playing field. So I guess I just want to finish up with that thought. Going to your next question, Dallas, how do you take it to scale? Well, the great thing is, or I'm sorry, Max, I think you asked the question. How you take
Dallas, but that's okay.
Dallas, thanks. Taking that to scale is that's the whole power of the system. So when you think of team of teams, for example, that's a structure that you can implement at a very small district, or you can implement at a large district. General McChrystal implemented it with tens of thousands of people across the entire globe. So I really try to look at systems that can be taken to scale. The other piece is really relying on the power of team, understanding that it's not about Jonathan doing all the work, even though I like to be everywhere and I like to give all my energy and I like to be enthusiastic and in the classroom. But the reality is it's not about one person. It never should be about one person. It's about the team. It's about building capacity. It's about inspiring others with a shared vision so that we're all carrying that forward together. And then it's about cheering people on. It's about celebrating the things that are going well. So when you think about, I have the largest school buildings in the state of Ohio. Some people will ask me, well, how do you do that? How do you bring 3,600 kids into one building during a pandemic and do it safely? Well, I don't do it alone. I mean, I have a team of people. We work together. We listen to the players. We make sure voices are heard, and then we co-create something that we know that we can take to scale, and we move forward with that. So, yeah, I think that's not a major worry or concern. Probably the concern is just Jonathan trying to be everywhere at once, and I'll have to slow that down just a little bit and pace that out. But I'm up for the challenge. I'm excited about it.
Okay,
Good.
thank you.
Thank you. Well, your pacing's you're doing really well so far with your pacing, Jonathan. We have about 20 minutes, maybe a little more, because we want to give you some time at the end. We have 7 open questions. So
Great.
We're going along, and these are really, really good questions. So I'll take this one, Dallas, and you can take the next one. How's that?
Good.
All right. Jonathan, can you talk about your experience in leading change in the area of diversity, equity, and inclusion?
Absolutely. So, so this is near and dear to my heart as well. And I'll show you, like, this is the center of the work that we do with inclusive excellence. We have 3 big rocks here. And one of the things I heard very clearly in my community conversations as I was out there in the public listening and listening to our teachers and our students was that one of the reasons that we at Mason City Schools are a destination district is that we have this rich diversity. We have over 75 languages spoken here. And so, but with that comes its own challenges. And so you want to do that well. And as you look at what's happened even over the last year with just the exposure of all of the things in our world with racial inequalities and all kinds of things that have been there, but have really become more and more clear to more people. This work must be at the heart and center of what we do. And it's not just something you do as a side. So for example, a lot of places will have that as a committee work or some side work. What we believe in and what I believe in is it has to be the heart of the work. So when you're thinking about inclusive excellence, and what I mean by that terminology is that you're not just looking at celebrating diversity, but you're understanding and looking at justice, you're looking at equity, you're looking at true inclusion. And when you really put your energy and efforts around that work, you realize that work is ongoing forever. It's not work that's just, it's not an initiative. It's heart work. It's changing our hearts to understand our bias. It's understanding our privilege. It's understanding where we are and how we work through that. And I say that with a lot of thoughtfulness behind it, because I understand that people are at different places on that continuum. So if I think of staff, for example, you don't just throw that in and say, change and do this. That's not the way that the process works. It's let's work together. Let's step through this together so that we can make a more inclusive excellence environment, not just for our students, but for our staff, that there's representation, that there's an understanding throughout the curriculum. And so that's been the heart of the work that we do here. Specifically, I was on a call today we're on spring break this week, but we have such dedicated teachers and friends that we had a call today, and we were working with some national experts because we've been invited to participate on several panels that are national panels on just the work that we're doing with inclusive excellence. And today specifically, we were talking about how we've invested resources in that work to make sure that work moves forward. So it's not just about rhetoric or language or some kind of a tagline, but it's really about the actual work and action taking place. And so that's feel free to, you can look that up on our website as well if you want more detail about what that looks like. Like we've developed the DEIJ principles in our district with our teachers, along with our teacher leaders, to understand diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice, and what those look like as they work through the curriculum thoughtfully and into our community. And also the support systems for our families and our parents. So how do you talk to your child about different things that they're seeing out there in the world today? And what language do your children need to know about and understand how it impacts people when they use it? And so there's just a lot of that. And we are not perfect. I don't know any place that is, but I think that's part of the work, is the humility in recognizing that there is work to be done and working together. So that's how we have invested and prioritized the work here. And that's one of the reasons, like when I read what your staff and what the community is looking for, experience with equity and inclusivity. That was like one of the lines on there. That's true to my heart. It's not just, it's a calling. It's the work that I'm about, and it's work that needs to be done thoughtfully. And so that's why I love that piece, or that opportunity, I should say.
Great.
Thank you.
The next question is, as you look into the Poudre School District, oh, it just disappeared, Max.
Sorry, Dallas.
Can you pull it up?
At the end of the day, that
Go to the next one, Dallas. I'll pull it up. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I hit done too early.
What is your process for handling parents who are upset and want to meet with you, if that ever happens?
Sure. Well, that does happen regularly. And I'm always happy to listen, I've never turned down a meeting to listen to people, because what I have learned over time is that everyone has a perspective, and their perspective is important to them, and it is real, and it's their reality. And so as parents come to me, I always try to listen. And then I try to ask questions carefully to understand. Like one question is, how have you interacted with the teacher or bus driver? Like, tell me about that conversation. How have you worked with your building administration to make sure that the leadership at the building level has had a chance? So it's not just jumping straight over levels. And if it does jump over levels and gets to me, my job is to build bridges back and to build bridges back and to repair relationships. Because here's the deal. We're a people business. You are always, when you put two people together, you're bound to have conflict. You're just going to have it. And so I often think of myself as a peacemaker. Like, I am there to build the bridges back, to listen carefully, and to understand. Now, every once in a while, you get people that could be very unreasonable. And so then your job is not just peacemaking, but is to build understanding and perspective, and to build perspective into others, to say, if you listen with an empathetic ear to this, and you can place yourself in their world, understand where they're coming from. And so I've been very fortunate in that process. It's not easy. Just today, someone references, but I had a parent, for example, just show up at my office, and they wouldn't leave until I came back. And I was over in another space. And so it took me a couple hours to get there because I was in a meeting, but I got there. They stayed there. They waited for me. And now we're in a great place. I was just 2 weeks ago, and we were able to work through those things. And I worked back with the teachers and brought people back together. And there was just some misunderstanding on where they were coming from. And then a week later, I had another parent that was doing a sit-in in one of my principal's offices, and
Wow.
with their kids. And so again, I was in negotiations, and so I got the call, and I said, I am right in the middle of a really important conversation, negotiations. Let us finish it up in 2 hours. I will be over there, and we'll work through this together. And the building principal handled it beautifully. Got everybody lunch. We sat down and shared a meal together, understood, and then we were able to move forward on the conflict that they had. So yeah, it is. It's a part of what we do, and it's something it's why I love the work.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. I found the question, Dallas. Sorry about that. I'll post it right here and then read it.
Good.
As you look into the school district, Jonathan, what are some successes and what are some opportunities for improvement?
Well, successes are just plentiful when I look at your school district. You have so much going on with innovation, choice, opportunities for kids, being able to the balance you found with choice schools where kids can choose where they're going to go, or families, and then also just the education excellence and the tradition of excellence that you have created as a school district is just, it's what gets me excited. It's what makes me want to join you as you go into the next iteration of the Poudre School District. And so you talk about opportunities. I think of the Poudre School District as a destination district regionally, but I see the potential as this becoming a nationally recognized place where you want to move, and not just you, but the businesses want to move, so that you have industry that's wanting to be there because they're so attracted to what's happening in the schools and the partnerships that they have. So I see that as an opportunity that's just right there. And I don't think it's far off. I think it's just building the bridges in the right places and seeing that potential realized. I think the other potential that I've read about is just, you have people coming from all over. And so it's building that sense of community and bringing people together because people are moving from California and everywhere else. And so just building that sense of community. And then also there's definitely always work when it comes to, like I call it inclusive excellence, but just recognizing that there are groups of people that might be marginalized groups of people who feel like their voice hasn't been heard. And so it's understanding and recognizing that and making sure that we have systems in place and in ways that people do have their voices heard. And back to a question I think one of your staff members asked earlier, just that equity piece is so important. And so how do we address that? And that's always going to be an opportunity for any school district. But I think I've also seen that as I look in, and I think there are great things in place that can be put together to move that work forward.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the next question is, how do you empower others to lead? How do you decide when you need to be the face and voice of action, or when to trust the actions of your teams or those you serve?
Well, trust is key to team. And if you have a healthy team, which I do, I am blessed to work on a dream team right now. And so when you trust your team and you build that together, then yes, it's all about empowering your team to lead. I don't need any special recognition. I often tell people that when things don't go well, I'll step right up and be the first to own that. When things go well, you all step up and get recognized for that. When my team tells me, Jonathan, you're the face of this, then I step up and do whatever needs to be done in that instance. So it's oftentimes listening to what are the needs at that moment. But your first part of that is, how do you empower other leaders? Well, it's all about building capacity and understanding their true north. And it's one of the things I'm most passionate about, and I hope that I get to do for the rest of my life, is to coach people and recognizing that, whether it's young people, students. I work with students on this as well, in student leadership, or teacher leaders, or I mentor other principals and other young superintendents in other districts. But it's that whole idea of asking questions so that they continually get closer and closer to understanding their values and their true north, and understand how when they go through moments in life that Bill George in his book, Authentic Leadership, talks a lot about the idea of running into crucibles of life. When you hit those crucibles, those challenges, how do you respond? How do you learn about yourself in that moment and become a stronger leader? And I'll tell you right now, going through this process in a community that I love and that I just have a feeling of love has been the most vulnerable thing I've ever done. And I do this because I feel like it is leading others to say, you know, he's taking this risk. He's doing this and modeling the way. When you model the way in those moments, it inspires others to consider those same kind of calculated risks. So yeah, modeling the way, asking good questions, coming alongside, allowing people to lead and experience that, and then being right there to help them when they fail and learning from that.
Great. Thank you very much. Great.
Yeah, thank you, Jonathan. We have the three more questions at least here, and they're all related to equity issues. So, Jonathan, this is one of the better questions I've heard, and the first I've ever heard in many of these forums we've done. Please identify the types of privilege present in your life and their impact on your professional journey thus far.
Excellent question. Someone has a deep understanding that's asking the question. I appreciate that. Yeah, I'll recognize right up front, being a white male and I was not in a middle class. I was in my parents were teachers, but we had to also, my mom stayed home, my dad taught, we didn't have much. I always tell people I had the look-alike Jordans all the way through school. Then I realized that there's actually real Jordans. And I saved my money up in my first paperboy job to buy my first pair of Nikes, you know. And so but even with that, being a white male in our world today, there's lots of privilege. I haven't had to think about many of the things that others have thought about. My nephews are African-American boys. And when we raise our kids together, because they're best friends, and we talk as parents about raising our kids and some of the things that Ruben and Theo face in our world today, and the things they have to think about, and the things that we have to talk to them about in terms of, you know, don't be alone in that situation compared to what my boys experience in the world, and just recognizing that and being humbled by that, and not that that's something that's you know, we've done this thing to become privileged. It is what it is in our world. And so recognizing it, appreciating it, and making sure that you recognize that others do not have that privilege. And so yeah, there's lots. We did a lot of work as a school district around identity and understanding your identity. So understanding what each of those levels are on the identity wheel, and then how those impact your bias and the unconscious bias and the ways that you've lived and some of the conditioning that you've experienced in your life. And we all have that. No matter who we are, we have some of those levels. And then, but it's also given me great empathy to make sure that I understand perspectives of others and understand what their experience, and understand how do I build a sense of belonging for others that don't have that same privilege. But yeah, I've done a lot of reading and a lot of work specifically around privilege and identity work. I've spoken on a few panels specifically on that work as well.
Right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah,
Go
thank
ahead,
you.
Dallas.
Question.
Okay, you've hit a little bit of this, but this question maybe is a little more pointed. How do you create equitable funding in the district with schools of varying age, size, and demographics?
Well, I think that comes down to the understanding the actual needs of the different schools, the different ages, and the groups, and making it equitable doesn't necessarily making it the same in each place. It means that we are looking at the whole and saying, how do I actually accomplish the goals of whatever that specific school needs, and what funding is it going to take? And if you're looking through that with a spirit of inclusive excellence while you're working through that, you should be asking those kind of questions naturally. And when you ask those questions, it hopefully will expose the gaps that are there. And when you recognize those gaps, that's where I believe you start to fill in and build the bridge of where that equitable funding comes into play. And so that's the way I would look at it. It would be a holistic look, and then listening closely to the specific needs and the story of each of those schools to move forward.
Thank you very much.
Good. Thanks, Jonathan. This next one's a long one. I'm going to put up here, and you would addressed it in, I think, in some depth a few minutes ago, but it goes a little beyond that too. So I'm going to read it because we do have folks on the phone. Equity and privilege is such a critical topic, both locally and nationally. What are your views on privilege, and how can you ensure that all nationalities, cultures, and orientations are represented and honored, and you are seen as a true representative and voice of everyone in our community, especially those that are historically marginalized?
Yeah, great. It's digging deeper into the understanding of privilege and where that is and how privilege can be a piece that people sometimes don't see and sometimes others do. And I did share how that work has gone for me specifically in the reflection. But in terms of making sure that I'm a voice, as superintendent, it's as a leader in general, it's not about you ever. It's not about you, and it's about others always. And I think that is a key component to the superintendency. The reason that I desire to be a superintendent in general is to represent other voices. That is the main heart and soul of why I want to be a part of it. I don't want to be a superintendent for the job. I don't want to be superintendent for other reasons. It's because it's this opportunity. When you ask me about my why is to use my talents, my privilege, my gifts to help to empower others. And that's getting other voices to the table, other nationalities represented. And the way you do that is you have to understand and understand that perspective. So it's that perspective taking, it's being in the space and understanding the stories of others and making sure those stories are heard, understood, that making sure that people understand the value and the reason why those voices need to be heard. And I will say that even through my leadership, I've not been perfect at that. So I don't want to claim that I've got this all figured out and I've written books about it. It's not about that. It's messy work, but it's work that's worth getting messy with. And it's work that I've had no problem rolling up my sleeves and trying my best to bring people to the table and to hear the perspectives. And while you hear those perspectives, you're also keeping that in balance with the whole community. And you're trying to bring your community. You don't want to take something and because that doesn't serve people well either. When you take one story and move it forward without understanding it within the context of the full story. And so, that's how I would do the work. And I'm not going to stop that work, whether it's at Poudre School District, Mason School District, or wherever, I get led to serve next. But that's just part of who I am. So that's going to be a part of the work.
Great. Well, thanks. I think I'll just repeat one question we heard, and then, well, actually, yeah, just in a minute or so, and then we want to give you another minute or two to finish. Jonathan, you've talked about a lot of great accomplishments tonight. What is an professional accomplishment of which you are most proud of?
Well, I'll tell you, all the accomplishments I've mentioned are not because Jonathan Cooper. So I want to make this really clear. I have an amazing team of people that I work with. So I give my team credit. I give my teachers, my staff credit. One of the most amazing accomplishments that I've been a part of. There's been so many this last year, like staying open for a whole year, doing that safely and building a plan that works with my staff. That's all something that's been done together. But I want to give one fun example, okay? Because this example will be with me forever. And some people might not think this is the most amazing example, but it's one that means a lot to me. And it's a story that honored lots of people. So our bus drivers, for example, when we went through the pandemic, there was a great fear that there was going to be layoffs. There's a great fear of what do we do when we first shut down schools. And one of the things, this is last spring, one of the things that our team came together, we said, to your point, how do we honor this group of people that is so important to us, but we're not driving kids to school? Like, how do we do this well? And so we started to brainstorm, and I had a teammate, because we love to iterate around ideas and say, how do we do this? And so we heard all these needs. The parents, what about my senior? What's going to happen to them for graduation? And bus drivers are worried about this. And then staff, I want to see kids one last time. And how do you bring all these interests to one space? And so through lots of collaboration, lots of thinking, we created And I would encourage you to go to our website and check this out. You can find it under Diploma Drop or something. Just find it on our YouTube channel, but because we have a whole professional video that just captured it so beautifully. But what we did was through lots of collaboration, we designed the personalized diploma delivery graduation. And we decorated, we had all of our bus drivers come together. They decorated our buses with big caps and tassels, and the whole bus was decorated like a graduate. And we had faces blown up on all of them, my board members, the directors, and myself, and the principal. And then we built out a whole system where all the staff that wanted to be a part of saying goodbye to someone could go on the bus safely and be a part of the delivery. And we went to every student's home throughout the entire district. And the whole neighborhood safely came together with their spacing. This is back in the spring outside, and they were able to honor each and every individual student with their diploma, delivering it to them. Our bus drivers were the heroes of the story. Our staff got to connect with students one last time. We got to do something that all of our seniors love so much that we still have parents today asking us if we could do that again this year. And we're like, well, we can almost be together. As much as we love that, the logistics were off the hook. So I share that one example because it really highlights the beauty of a whole system working together for one end. And that's the main thing I love about leadership, is bringing people together around difficult challenges to move forward and to honor lots of different interests in that.
Right. Well, thanks, Jonathan. We've got about 30 seconds. You want to any last words for our attendees tonight? Thank you for that example.
Thank you for asking. Last words, I would say this. I really do wish you all the very best luck in your process. I really do. I want you to have the best leader that is right for you. And you're going to know that by the end of the process. The process has been very thorough. If that's me, I would be honored to come and serve in the Poudre School District. My family, Henry, Wyatt, Miles, and Tessa, and my wonderful wife and best friend, Michelle, would be happy to serve holistically in your school district and to get to know each and every one of you. And if it's not us, I hope that you find the right person, and I wish you the very best. And I'll be in town next week, so if anyone wants to get together and connect, and I'd be happy to do that as well.
Great. Jonathan,
thank you so much again for your time tonight.
Yes, and thank you for your time. Great.
Thank